Welcome to Good Faith Reads. I'm your host, Cliff Vaughn at Good Faith Media. Good Faith Reads is a short podcast in which we focus on one of our book authors at Good Faith Media. We've published a considerable library of titles, and we invite you to check them out at goodfaithmedia.org/shop. Today's guest is Kelsey Davis, co-author, along with Claire Brown, of the Athlete Devotional, 40 Days of Spiritual Practice. Kelsey is joining us remotely from Asheville, North Carolina. Kelsey, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Cliff. Glad to be here.
The book is aptly named The Athlete Devotional. I don't think we need to run down the summary. Let's just get right into it. And I wanted to read part of the introduction from page 6. Here we go. You say, "Being a Christian athlete has always meant that my faith has no walls or even a specific geographic location. Rather, I learned through playing soccer all over the world that God is found everywhere, anywhere, and in everyone. The divine, the spirit, the sacred, or as my tradition says, the image of God, is in each one of us." I read that and I had two observations. One, I noted how sports for you and for so many others is really connected to travel and broadening horizons. And my second question, as someone who competed at an elite level for you, was, did you ever have conflicted feelings about seeing the image of God in someone and then just wanting to go out and kick their butt on the field?
Yeah, thanks, Cliff. So in terms of, sport, being connected to travel and broadening horizons, I was really fortunate from a young age, around the age of 14, to start traveling with the U.S. Youth National Team system. And so I really spent the bulk of my adolescence and young adulthood traveling all over the world to train and to play internationally. And so I got to be exposed to other cultures, other styles of play, the personalities that show up in the form of sport, from the different cultures. So when we were playing in Germany, you got to see some sort of Germanic culture showing up on the field with how organized it is. And, theologically, that makes sense to me now as a theologian. But yeah, it really did instill in me just a deep love for diversities, for cultures, for learning people in their sense of place. We would always get to learn about local foods and customs as we traveled abroad. And so I still hold to this day just a love to learn new people and new places. And to your second question, of course, there's conflict, to honor the dignity of every human being and see the image of God while also trying, to compete. And what I love about that tension is what, the book of Proverbs really speaks to, of iron sharpening iron. And so if you bring your best, I bring my best, hopefully the third thing between us will help us both be leveled up and a little bit better.
Each devotion is 1 to 2 pages, and it has the following components: scripture, belong, grow, pray, and act. And I really loved the act section in particular because it has this kind of workbook-like flavor to the devotional, which I thought was awesome. Can you comment a little bit more on the act section?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm actually actively reading through the book of James again, and arguably one of the earliest writings in the New Testament that sort of summarizes the whole of the gospel of Jesus' life and mission. And, James goes forth to say that faith without works is dead, or something along those lines. And so, this question of how do we put our faith into action? What does it mean to pray with our feet, to live out the very thing that we proclaim, is at the center and heart of this devotional. So it's kind of the Christian ethics, the question of the so what, right? So we've just heard scripture, we've just reflected. So what does that mean for how that influences our lives or transforms our being and our doing and how we show up? And so Claire and I really wanted to make sure to add that piece in of the so what. So how do I practice this piece of my faith that I just reflected on? In terms of sports world, there's this old adage that practice makes perfect. And I say that that's not true. So practice makes permanent. What we practice actually creates the habit in us that shapes our behaviors and our impact on the world. So we wanted to get really specific with the action section that to invite people to practice in a way that was intentional and dedicated so that what they are practicing or being invited to practice actually, has positive, transformative impact on their spiritual life.
Yeah, you nailed it, even in the subtitle of the book, 40 Days of Spiritual Practice.
There you go.
The important component. Day 7 of the devotional and day 25, both of those, and others to a degree, but certainly both of those touch on the idea of rest, which I found particularly interesting, again, coming from you, a top-level athlete. And I wondered if you could talk about the idea of rest in the context of sports, which I think for some people, even though we hear about, baseball pitchers and they need days of rest, like we get that, but nevertheless, for me at least, it still seems hard to square the idea of pushing your body to the limit with rest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's like, I know this is a podcast folks are listening to, and I would say like a resounding, raise your hand if rest is something that is difficult for us to come by. I think I would anticipate most hands would go up, in the podcast community, because we live in a capitalist society that is predicated on, work and production, right? And so the idea of rest can be seen, and I think has been seen, both in the sports world and in Christianity, as some sort of sense of complacency. I remember being a young athlete and a coach telling me as I was sort of budding into the youth national team system, budding up, to say, Kelsey, it's really important that you understand you need to go chase down someone, and someone else is trying to chase down you to take your spot. So, don't ever sort of get complacent. And the way that translated to my young mind was never rest, right? There's always work to be done, always be productive, always be pushing. To come to find out some years later, a couple of things. One, in the sports world, thank goodness, sports science and sports performance has evolved to understand that it's impossible to be in the red zone, if you will, and to just be burning it at both ends, that leads to injury, to burnout, to a shortened career. And so the sports science world has evolved to understand periodization, that there's times to push harder, there's times to back off, there's times to be off and to be recovering, to find a better rhythm of actually honoring your body, honoring the seasonal rhythms of performance and competition. And parallel to that, in the Christian tradition, there's deep ancient wisdom that God creates this whole world and then rests, right? And so there's a call as Christians to Sabbath, to actually taking intentional time, be it once a week, be it in smaller bite-sized moments throughout the day, intermittently, to really pause, to breathe, to be still, to let go. And in doing so, we let God be God, and we remember that we are human beings that are not created for work, that we are here to toil and to contribute, but that we are here actually to be beings that get to delight in life and delight in creation and in the gifts that have been given to us. And I don't know about you, Cliff, but it is in the practices of slowing down, of resting, that I'm actually able to take a breath, to exhale and realize, what is good in my life, what needs to be transformed, even places maybe I've misstepped to need to apologize. And so in that slowing down and that restfulness, we get to take stock, take inventory, to just be. I was thinking earlier today, I was on a walk and I was sort of praying as I was walking, taking one of those kind of Sabbath moments, to just breathe a little bit. And I thought, instead of Nike's "Just Do It" slogan, like what if we produce a bumper sticker or something that's just "Be It," and that we sort of start to promote more of this, that it's permission. It's okay to be. It's okay to rest, and not only is it okay, but it's necessary. Both in sport and in life, you have to. Otherwise, you're gonna run yourself ragged.
Yeah, and I love how you really melded both what we learn, what ancient wisdom teaches us, as well as what we're learning from sports science, for example, about, I hate to say maximizing efficiency, but nevertheless, but in other words, recognizing rhythms and how breakneck speed all the time, always, is not the best.
That's right. That's right.
We'll be right back with more Good Faith Reads.
I'm Mitch Randall, CEO of Good Faith Media. We're a nonprofit dedicated to inclusion for all, freedom for all, and justice for all. And we invite you to support us in this work by becoming a Good Faith Advocate. Everyone who donates $50 or more per year becomes a Good Faith Advocate. You'll get our free quarterly magazine, discounts at our bookstore, access to other exclusive content, and much more. You'll also be supporting media content and journalism that makes a difference. Consider becoming a Good Faith Advocate today at goodfaithmedia.org.
Welcome back to Good Faith Reads. Today we're joined remotely by Kelsey Davis, co-author of the Good Faith Media book, The Athlete Devotional, 40 Days of Spiritual Practice. I'm Cliff Vaughn of Good Faith Media. Kelsey, day 19 in the devotional is about rituals, and I love this because of the prevalence of both ritual in both sports and religion. Talk more about ritual, please.
Oh man, making rituals, from day 19, was a really fun one for Claire and I to co-write, because we too both love ritual, and I've said over and over until I'm like blue in the face that athletes are people of ritual. That we have a process by, if you're preparing for training, if you're preparing to go work out, lift, for game day, especially for match day, most athletes are going to be able to tell you sort of what their setup is in order to get themselves grounded, present, ready to go, in order to show up and offer their best and highest selves to the effort. And so, as an Episcopal priest, who's embedded in a liturgical and sacramental tradition, which basically translates to, I'm a Christian of deep ritual, in patterning and sort of doing same activities with intention over and over and over again. It was really fun to write this one. Rituals keep us grounded. They give us connection and continuity. They connect us to a bigger story. They are the way in which that practice making permanent. Rituals are a tool by which we are able to carve out space and time in order to intentionally connect to ourselves, connect to God, connect to just something bigger than ourselves. I've found that rituals, aren't necessarily guaranteed. It's not like it's a 1-for-1 that if I go through my exact pattern, that means I'm going to have the best game of my life or the best day of my life or feel, uber close to God or something like that. But they are a discipline, I think, of both grit and grace, that, our grit in being able to show up and ritualize our lives with intention, with love, that then it opens up the capacity for us to be more receptive and more receptive to the graces, to the love, to the mercies that are all around us. So it helps to orient us, to turn our hearts and our minds in a specific direction. For me, as a Christian athlete, in that direction of that my athletic performance, my offering is a devotion. It was, I was turning my heart and my hands and my head towards God. And so rituals allow us to be able to do that. The thing that's really cool too is that rituals also help us to remember that the presence of God is always with us. And so, no matter how you're feeling or where you're at, if you have a ritual that's intentional, it helps to ground you and to remember that God is with you. So yeah, it's I think in the future, Cliff, I might want to write an article or a paper on mapping our Episcopal liturgy through a soccer match.
Oh, nice.
And how those components sort of line up. One of my favorite things as a soccer player, football player is, the ritual of songs, that are sung in soccer stadiums, and how the procession of the community walks into a stadium together, and the songs that are being sung and throughout the matches, it's really beautiful.
I'm going to get really old school. We're going to fax you a contract for that book right now, Kelsey. And yeah, what a lovely column article book. We're here for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I have to ask, did you have a game day ritual that you can share? At least give us one. Yeah.
Yes. So I would clean my dorm room, apartment, house every game day, unless the match was super early or something like that. But if the match was later in the afternoon or in the evening, I would always clean. I would always get a vanilla latte, so a nice cup of coffee, and I would always take a shower. So those were kind of my 3 prep things that really helped me get grounded and in the flow.
That's great. I'm glad I asked. Day 24 is on meditation and centering prayer. And I wonder if you can help listeners understand the link between what meditation can do for us in our spiritual lives, what it might do for athletes and athletic performance. In other words, are we talking about the same thing here when we read about athletes and they talk about visualizing and meditation, and then there's spiritual meditation? Is this the same thing or no?
Sure. Great question, Cliff. So, I'm such a nerd. I just finished a really great article on the spiritual dimensions around resilience and how resilience is fostered. Sort of what's the recipe for resilience, and one of the key components for resilience is a meditative practice. Because what it allows us to do, and I'm not a psychologist, I'm just a priest. So my understanding of what meditation helps us do and what mindfulness practice helps us do is really focus and hone in on letting go and also on the one thing. And so, we have all this noise, we have a myriad of voices sort of coming in and out of us all day long, ton of to-do lists each of us have that feel like they never get done, anxieties, distractions, etc., right? They call it, I think we name it in the book too, like monkey mind. That's sort of the common understanding of when your mind needs to go in a million directions, which I will say for the record, there is some meditation and some mindfulness practice that honors that monkey mind as well. And, it's about coming back and honing into the one thing, which typically lands in your breath and in your being present, not dwelling in the past too far, not dwelling in the future too far, but just being here now, which I think, at least for me as a human being and as a spiritual being, is one of the hardest things to do in the entire world, which is just to be here now. So, mindfulness, meditation, centering prayer, these are, I would say they're sibling concepts of each other. Each one has its own sort of distinct definition, its distinct flavor of how it's lived out and practiced. How it can impact athletic performance, especially mindfulness, based training and meditation, is that again, sort of carving out that space and time to let go of what was, to let go of what will be, all of the voices, noises, and just to be here, or as the sports world might say, to try to get into the flow. And flow, as my dear friend James Franklin loves to talk about, flow is what we are both trying to achieve in sport and in the spiritual life, which is that radical sense of chronos and kairos time, this intersection of both, like, I am somehow catching a ball and imminently present to it while then having this like 360-degree awareness. It's something pretty sacred, but also magical. And so mindfulness and mindfulness-based training helps us develop those spiritual muscles to be able to heighten and deepen receptivity, so that when flow comes, we're able to really receive it and be in it. And I think likewise with the spiritual life, that we get these glimpses, Cliff, I think, where the veil between earth and heaven gets peeled back. And maybe, you see someone or something in a new light or in a different way that feels like it's illuminated with love, with grace, with gratitude, with joy. Even in the midst of really difficult circumstances, we might be able to see just for a moment and really flow with life and with meaning and truth in a way that feels almost like we're radically there, but then it's sort of beyond ourselves as well. And so mindfulness, meditation, centering, prayer, I think are some of the practices, some of those ritual practices that help us build the muscles to notice it when it comes.
I'll make a side note about the availability of the spiritual autobiography section and how that's part of the gift of the book, in my opinion. So there's questions to answer and things to think about. Can you just talk more about writing your own spiritual biography and why and how y'all put that in the book?
Yeah. There's this great gift that our discernment process for holy orders in the Episcopal Church gives us, which is that, and Claire and I are both Episcopal priests, and so we share in this gift and this love that we get to write a spiritual autobiography as part of our discernment process, to discern if we're ordained or called to ordained ministry or to lay ministry. And writing a spiritual autobiography is not just reserved to that. It's a spiritual practice writ large that a lot of people pick up on. The biblical narrative as a sacred text is a story. It's a story of God and stories of God and humanity and creation, really trying to work this relationship out, of how it's intended to be nurturing and loving, liberating, and all of the complexities of God and humanity and creation wrestling its way through that. And so, really, we are also built for story as human beings. And it's one of the coolest gifts of being human is that, we're people of story, and we get to tell stories, learn stories, both through written and oral tradition and visual traditions. And so the process of writing a spiritual autobiography is really to look back on the trajectory of your life, and to start to tell your story and to notice the ways that God has shown up or felt absent, from when you were very young to where you are now. And that we all have a unique, spiritual autobiography, a unique way of relating to God and the sacred, unique ways of sharing those moments, often ordinary moments that felt extraordinary and holy and sacred to us. And so this part about writing the autobiography was really important to us in this devotional as an invitation to get to know your own journey a little bit, more deeply. And also, if you're willing to share that journey with others, not as a way to convince or coerce or, drive anyone in any one direction, but simply to be able to be reflective and say, you know what? I saw the sacred showing up in my life in these ways when I was 10, 12, 14, 20, 30, whatever. And I felt God really absent during these times too, as an offering to connect with other people who are on a spiritual journey themselves, and trying to make meaning as well.
Day 28 is on injury and recovery. And I wondered if you would talk a little bit about athletes and any struggles to disconnect self-worth from athletic performance.
Yeah, it's so hard. My story, my spiritual autobiography is deeply connected to injury and recovery. I broke my jaw my senior year, going into my senior year of college. My jaw was wired shut for 6 weeks, and it was right after my dad had died. And it was just an incredibly difficult time. I'm grateful I had really good teammates who took good care of me. And I tore my ACL twice when I was a professional athlete, which inevitably ended my career, in too soon. And so to write this on injury and recovery, was deeply personal for me, and to have Claire's accompaniment in the writing was really important. But the unfortunate side of sports, I think, is that athletes' bodies are often commodified, right? It's like your body is your tool. Your body is your value and your worth. Often, if you're getting NIL deals or on a professional contract, so if you're not healthy and able to perform, very quickly, your perspective, your mind can turn to, what is my place on this team? What is my value? Am I of value anymore? Am I going to get cut? Am I going to get traded? And so it can get scary really, really quickly for athletes that are injured. So it was really important to us in writing this piece that we reminded athletes of who they are and their worth being grounded in their belovedness with God first as a full human being, that their performance is not their identity, their contracts are not their identity, but to see themselves as God sees them, which is as it's good and valuable and worthy just as they are. Simultaneously to look at injury and to name it as a difficult time that can be isolating. Also, an opportunity and invitation for a time of reflection and a time to re-up and to literally recover, and uncover a sense of purpose. Why are they doing the sport that they're doing? And how can they also, from that position of being the teammate that is now rehabbing and in recovery, how can they still participate and cheer on their teammates, from that place in the team ecosystem, that they still are of value to the team, to the club, to the organization, just in a redefined way. And, to encourage them that absolutely, not only are they worthy as human beings, but they are also still worthwhile as teammates, and can contribute.
You mentioned the team ecosystem, and growing up playing sports, being on a team was my favorite part. and you see the different personalities, and you kind of learn who needs what, and you're one of these people. You need things, but you're kind of you realize how you need to show up for other people as a good teammate, as a person, but as an Episcopal priest. I'm wondering how does this look like in ministerial context? Is there any similarity?
Oh my gosh. I mean, total. We open the devotional with the body of Christ, and that we are all members of this one body. And, if you take the sports metaphor, if you're trying to win a championship, or we're in Christian speak, we're trying to win the championship of love. We're trying to be part of a team that is exuding and embodying and fostering more belonging and love, bring a little bit of heaven to earth right now. And so absolutely, we all have our different gifts, personalities, pathways, approaches to how that works. As a priest, and as a former coach too, one of my great joys is getting to be in community and to get to know people and to see their gifts and be able to call and invite those gifts forward, and to work on the coalescing of our cooperation as a communal body, to move together as best we can. And so, yeah, absolutely. It's, requires me to be hopefully like somewhat emotionally intelligent and understand that, introverts and extroverts and ambiverts all have different energy levels, and I'm a teacher of the Enneagram, that there's different pathways and personalities and approaches. So, to be emotionally intelligent enough to honor each and every person's way of being and doing, and hopefully be someone who's helping people connect more deeply to themselves, but to each other for the overall mission of God, which I see as, like I said, it's trying to win the championship of love.
An important note to all of our listeners: we at Good Faith Media are always accepting book proposals. Our authors engage with an experienced team of editors, designers, and marketers to produce and sell books on a variety of topics. If you have a book proposal you'd like to run by us, head on over to goodfaithmedia.org for more information. That's goodfaithmedia.org. Kelsey, lastly, could you leave us with a concluding thought from the book?
Sure. So I wanted to lift up my dedication in this book, which is to Heather, who is my wonderful wife. And I say to her, Heather, your love is a sacred gift. Thank you for being the best teammate. I can't, it makes me feel emotional, Cliff, to express my deep gratitude for Heather and for her companionship, not only in life and in marriage, but along this journey of writing this devotional. She's championed every right and left turn that I've tried to make, and was really just a presence of courage and strength for me when I tried to quit this project, 10 different ways and 10 different times. I got to meet Heather when we were coaching a sports leadership academy together, and I remember the first time that I met her and heard her speak, and I thought, my goodness, I want to be just like this person. And I had always said that I wanted to marry someone who had been a captain of a team, who was the truest leader, on and off the field. And luckily enough, I got to marry, a captain. She was captain of her collegiate soccer team. And Heather's quiet strength and her wisdom, her intelligence, her humility, the way that she shows up in the world and teaches me, informs me every day. And so, I am who I am today because of her and her influence in my life. So dedicating this book to her has really meant a lot.
Well, thank you, Kelsey, and to Heather. And to your co-author, Claire Brown, the book is The Athlete Devotional, 40 Days of Spiritual Practice. This book, along with many other titles, is available at goodfaithmedia.org/shop. Our guest today has been Kelsey Davis. Kelsey, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.